This video is sponsored by Squarespace. Back when I shot all my videos using my trusty A6400 and 16mm f1.4 Sigma, I was fiending like a crackhead for a super wide f2.8 lens for my camera, because at times I felt like 16mm on my APS-C camera felt kind of tight and I wanted something wider. Now I did own the 10-18 f4, I still own it, but I never use it. And there's a reason why I never recommended it in previous videos. Here are about 7 things you should know about the Tamron 11-20mm f2.8 for Sony E-mount. It's about a full frame equivalent of a 16-30mm. In my opinion, the sweet spot for anyone vlogging, filming themselves. Yes sir. This is truly a wide angle macro. With the lens hood on, I could press this up against something and it will still be able to focus on it. The focusing on it is really fast and snappy. The center sharpness is great and the corner sharpness is pretty decent. Much better than the Sony 10-18 f4, but I'm gonna get into that in a little bit. It's small and lightweight. It balances well on a small camera like the Sony A6600, A6000, whatever you got. It has a 67mm filter thread, weather sealing gasket, unlike the 10-18 f4, and it's selling for $829. One thing this lens doesn't have that the Sony 10-18 f4 does have is a built-in image stabilization. So if you own an A6400, A6500, A6100, A6000, whichever one it is that doesn't have IBIS built in, this is something to consider. Or maybe not. When you're using a wide lens like this, you won't see much of that camera shake anyway, obviously depending on your technique. In almost every other way than the IBIS and the 10-18 being a tad more compact and wider, the Tamron 11-20 beats it in every way. It's an all-around sharper lens, especially when it comes to the corners. That's when the 10-18 just falls apart. The Tamron gives you much better performance when it comes to chromatic aberration. As you can clearly see in these landscape shots, when shooting against the sun, the Tamron retained the contrast and sharpness of my wife much better than a 10-18 in the center. But let's get to the biggest feature of this lens. Why would you want to buy it? That's for the 2.8 aperture. Since these crop sensor cameras don't do terribly well in low light, that one-stop advantage from 2.8 compared to the f4 on the Sony makes even that much bigger of a difference. Not only will you be able to get cleaner, less noisy photos and video, but you'll get decent amount of background blur and separation. For my vloggers out there, the 2 best lenses you can buy for APS-C cameras, you already know this one, the Sigma 16-1.4. And now this one, the 16-1.4, is gonna give you a sharper image. It's a prime lens, you know? And it's significantly more background blur with the f1.4 aperture, but it doesn't zoom, and 16mm being a 24mm full frame equivalent sometimes isn't wide enough to capture what you want. If you need a wide angle lens that can zoom, this is the perfect option, but you will have to pay double the price of the 16mm. The only reason to consider even getting the old Sony 10-18 f4 is if you need a slightly wider lens and if you think you can benefit from the IBIS. But I think, in my honest opinion, it's just not worth it. I would pay extra to get something like this, get decent amount of background blur, you're gonna get way better image quality. Or get the Sigma and just deal with the fact that you can't zoom, but you're gonna get, thank you Tamron for not forgetting about Sony APS-C, because I still think there's a good amount of you out there, and for everyone likes to film themselves nowadays, this is the lens. It's a zoom lens. A lot of people miss having a zoom. 16 to 30mm is a very, very nice range to have. I'm mostly full frame now. I have the A7S III FX3 and I have the A7C. I ditched my APS-C cameras, but if I was still shooting APS-C, I would make sure this lens is in my bag. I went to the Shed Aquarium with my wife and kid. I shot videos of my daughter with this camera and this lens setup, and I could tell you, even using the Sony A7S III and the 20mm 1.8, which is a smaller setup, using something like this, I noticed how much more compact this is versus a camera that's, you know, it's not that much bigger, but you know, it is bigger. It's very nice and compact to use this setup. When you're shooting frame rates like 120 frames per second, you're gonna get that crop with these cameras, and having a wider lens will keep your lens a wide angle lens. You know, when you're doing it on a 24mm, it really crops in. So yeah, thank you Tamron and Sigma for keeping the Sony APS-C system alive, because I feel like without these lenses, what's the benefit of shooting with such a small camera? You can't get, you would have to buy a full frame wide angle lens that costs $3,000, like the 12 to 24 Sony. Wouldn't make much sense, would it? And the Tamron 17 to 70 is not bad either. The 17 to 70 2.8, it's a bigger lens, but it's a good range. Okay, why am I still talking? So now for a quick message from my long time sponsor, and that is Squarespace. So whether you are looking for a website, blog, you wanna sell some products online, you should try Squarespace. Even your non-technology savvy grandma could set up her own website. It's that easy to use. Wanna change things up? You can preview and change the entire look of your website with a click of a button. Run into any kind of trouble, they offer 24/7 customer support. I make a great side income selling my color grading presets, my portrait retouching tutorial using my Squarespace online store. Every photographer and videographer needs to have a website. Instagram, Facebook, it isn't yours. Your website is, and that is the most professional way of presenting yourself to a client. Who doesn't love a discount? And if you want 10% off, use the code MANNY. And I'll leave a link at the top of the description, so check that out.